Good, okay. I'm Charles Carlisle, and I'm with Bristol Development Group. We are the developer and sponsor for the Charrette. And so the first thing I'd like to do is thank you for being here tonight. We really want to get public participation. And not only am I glad you're here tonight, but I would encourage you to come back during the next 5 days and participate as much as you want to, as much as you can. Brian Wright, who I'll turn this over to in a moment, will explain the process that we're going to be going through. But from 9 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock at night, starting tomorrow morning through Monday, we are going to be working on a master plan for these properties that we're talking about here. Oh, and I guess just to be clear, I hope the posters and all were clear. The properties that we are talking about are the 3 parcels on either. There's one parcel on the south side of Amelia Island Parkway that's 25 acres. That's just north of the airport, and 2 parcels on the north side of Amelia Island Parkway that flank on either side the lakeside senior living community. So those are the properties that we have in mind. But anyway, I'd encourage you to come back, and especially to come back next Monday evening when we will present the results and the final master plan that we developed from this charrette. I'd like to also ask, because of the number of people we have and limited ability to communicate because of the microphones, we hold questions until the end. I hope we will answer a lot of the questions you might have as we're going through the charrette, but I promise you that we will not leave until you've had a chance to ask questions if we haven't answered them by the end. So again, Bristol Development Group is the name of our company. We're based in Franklin, Tennessee, which is part of the Nashville metropolitan area. I'm guessing some of you have looked on our website. In fact, I know some have because they've mentioned it. We have been, for the most part, in the last decade, developers of urban type sites in downtown or near downtown areas where they're not surrounded by single family neighborhoods, where high density and height are sometimes appropriate. And I just want to say right off, we recognize that the properties on Amelia Island are nothing like the things that you see on our website. We pride ourselves on not being cookie cutter developers, on trying to tailor every development to the location and context of its surroundings. And we recognize how special Amelia Island is, how sensitive it is, that this will have to be a different approach. And so there's nothing that you'll find on our website that looks like what we expect might come out of this charrette. The last thing I'd like to point out is how the development process usually works and how we plan to do this time. I'm sure a lot of you have seen developers come in the past, and they have worked with engineers and architects and consultants, sometimes for months, developing a plan, and they come into a planning commission or city commission with a program that they want to get approved. And that's the first opportunity the public has to hear about it. And by that time, the buildings are designed, the access points are designed, the size is determined, the parking areas are determined, and all those things are baked in the oven. And so that often leads to resentment and often leads to opposition. And it is not a good process in order to get public consent and participation. So the purpose of this charrette is to turn that process around 180 degrees and to solicit public input up front. I promise you, we do not have a single computer drawing or scrap of paper with a plan on it that represents what we expect this to look like at the end. The way this site will be designed is by this charrette process, and we will listen to the comments. We will ask you for your ideas, and we will take all those into account. And everything we do from 9 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night is open to the public. You're welcome to come in and watch the people who are designers at work. We're going to have technical meetings. We'll have brainstorming sessions, and all that's going to go on. And at the end of this, we plan to have a master plan that we would use as the basis for our request for entitlements. And so that's a very different process, and we hope here that you'll agree that it's the right way to plan the development of these very special parcels. So I'm going to shut up and turn this over now to Brian Wright. Brian is with Town Planning and Urban Design Cooperative. It's a firm that does a lot of this kind of work. They even write zoning codes and things like that as well. They happen to be based in Franklin, Tennessee as well, though this is the first time we've had the opportunity to work together. We also have a team. Well, Brian has a number of people on his team. We have architects, civil engineers, sustainability consultants, attorneys, and other people involved in this whole process. So we have a fairly large team of people that will be here throughout the next 5 days. So thanks very much, Brian.
Thank you. All right, so thank you so much for coming. One thing that I'll point out to you now is Charles hasn't seen this presentation. That tells you a little bit about the process. He has no idea what I'm about to show you, what I'm about to say, any of that stuff. Our process is all about true and meaningful engagement with the community. That's why they brought us in. That's why they hired us. We do great plans, and that's, you know, we like that too. But for me, the thing that I enjoy the most is the public process and interacting with the community. Now, we work for developers, but we also work for cities and counties around the country doing planning on a citywide basis. So the whole city would come in, not just people who live adjacent to or are concerned about a particular piece of property. It's like, what do you want to see for the future of your whole city or town? And so that process works well and is often done for cities and towns. It's rarely done for private development projects because most developers want to hide in the shadows until they can spring upon you their big ideas and really just try to convince you to like what they've come up with already, right? So when we do these projects like this for private development, we always hear people say, like, sure, you don't have anything, right? And so I say, yeah, there's nothing in my back pocket. We don't have, like, I refuse to even begin to think about it. I mean, we do a little bit of homework as far as like, let's understand what's important about the site, the environmental considerations and those kind of things. But for me to start sketching and drawing and designing, what I'll then do as somebody who is passionate about design and planning is I'll get married to an idea before I've heard from anybody. And then I'm now in a position where I'm like defending this idea. No, you don't understand. This is great. We came up with this. And so I just won't look at it. So there will be times, especially at the beginning of this process, you'll ask me questions and I won't know the answer. Most consultants won't say, I don't know, but we do a lot. We try to be transparent in, you know, just kind of where we are. We're learning. You know, I got to walk, I still have my boots on. I walked the site today in the rain and used some, you know, palmetto fronds to shield us. And so we'll go out there again. And that's one of the reasons why we set up our office and our Charrette, you know, we actually bring our team here for all these days in a row to embed ourselves in the community. One, we can go out on the site at any time and look at something that we're interested in because we want to make sure that the plans that we work on are going to be as sensitive and contextual to the site as humanly possible. And if we're back in Franklin, just like looking at some topo lines on a map and studies, it's not the same. And also too, to drop in and say like, hey, what do you guys think? What are you excited about? What are you looking for in the future? You just can't do that. And, you know, it doesn't work, especially for a project like this, a site like this, a community like this, because, you know, the first answer is we don't want anything. What are you doing here, right? Exactly. So to just drop in one evening and just chat with you, you know, we're not gonna really understand kind of where you're coming from, what the concerns are, what's important about the site. And so I'm going to run through this presentation. Then we're going to get to the hands-on workshop exercise here, where we're going to work around the tables here in groups and start to understand the site in a way that you may not have even before, and to share your thoughts with us. Now, we know that a lot of consultants who are coming in to a community like this wouldn't dare put such a beautiful picture of the site up on the screen. Everybody's going to say like, oh yeah, that's what you're going to destroy, right? That's what you're here to do. I know, I understand. I have a degree in environmental design and have a master's in landscape architecture. And so I'm as concerned about every site we work on as anyone could be, right? So when we have an opportunity to work on a project that actually has real environmental, sensitivity, needs, character, all of these things in a group, an educated citizenry who cares about it, and you probably know more about some of the topics we're going to talk about than we do, because you guys are so passionate about it. Hopefully some of our topical experts will know as much, if not more than you about those things, but more than me in some cases. And so as we go through this process, we're also going to learn things from you all. And we're going to let all that time that you've spent studying in preparation for all the developments that have come before and that you've gone up against, or I don't know if you've ever supported any, but some places they do. That's why I keep asking, it's like, are there any good developments here around? And I can't really think of any, and so we'll stretch your minds to try to think of some of those things too. But what we want to do through this process is work together to create a project that will be a model, like a national model, right? Charles said something to me, I wish he had shared it with you a minute ago, but he said something to me when we first started working together. And I was just asking about his career and his path in life and all of that stuff. And he literally lives like 5 doors down the street from me. We didn't even know it. And next thing he like comes to a meeting, he's like, oh, you live down the street from me, huh? And he said, I'm at the point in my career where I don't want to just work on projects. I want to work on things that I'm really passionate about. And for me, as a consultant, we work with all kinds of clients. They don't all say that, right? They're all just, a lot of them are bottom line. And we actually, though, do have a set of design principles and philosophies that we operate under. So if someone said to me, hey, we've got this great site, we want to put a Walmart out wherever, not this site, but just any site. That's just not what we do. So call another firm, we want to focus on place, on character. So there may be times when you're asking questions, and I may say, I can't speak for Charles, but that's not what we do. And so as long as we're working on the project, you'll see these are the kind of the path that we'll follow. So I'm going to jump in here after we do the hands-on session. Actually, before, I'm going to pause for a minute before we start it. We're going to take some questions because I know you all have some things you want to say. Then after the hands-on workshop, I'm going to open it up. I'm going to sit down up here in the front, and we're going to, as long as you all want to talk, I will sit here. We have a dinner reservation at some point, but usually the team just leaves me and I have to find my way there. So, but nonetheless, it really is, I know I'm doing a lot of talking right now and will for the next 30 minutes or so. But after that, it's all about you. So as Charles mentioned, we have quite a team. So we have the development team, we have my team with planning and design, we have sustainability and engineers. And this is something interesting here, because one of the things that we know is, as we're looking at how to deal with stormwater around here, it's this weird conflict with the regulations. If you make the ponds that are required in most cases, you wipe out the trees, right? And so how do we strike a balance between that so we don't have to take down one more tree than is absolutely necessary? So that's something we brought in experts on that. And so they're going to be working with us throughout the week, and you all will be here and chat with them and share ideas and thoughts. We also have architecture and construction side of it. So again, part of making a special project is, yes, obviously the conservation, the preservation side of it, but also the placemaking and the character and the architectural vernacular. So what do we want to do? How many apartment developments, apartment complexes, right? That's what I would say. If we do anything in an apartment complex, then we failed, right? But how many apartment or multifamily projects do you see? They just all look the same, every one of them. And it's like, are they all just hiring the same architect? Like, why do they all look the same? They have no bearing on what is the local style, what is the local architectural vernacular. And here on Amelia Island, you guys have an incredible array of architecture from all these different eras that are beautiful. And so to draw from that, So our architecture team will be here working and looking and studying, and we'll have some ideas to start to say, like, here's what we think are thinking about for the architectural style or styles of this project. So, and then we also will have our transportation specialist here, and he focuses on multimodal transportation, not just on cars. Because what we know is if we're only moving people around in cars, we're causing problems, right? So we want to be able to tie into the trails. We want to look at other opportunities for biking and walking and capturing some of the trips within the site and these sort of things. He'll be here to talk about that as well. So we have the poster, hopefully you've seen it, and the Charrette schedule here. So we are here on Thursday evening at the opening presentation workshop. Tomorrow, on Friday, we have a 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. design studios open. So that's when we're gonna start working based on what we hear tonight. So all that's open, you can drop in anytime, but there's also meetings for different topics. So at 9 a.m., we have a meeting on utilities and infrastructure. We know that's important. And so we're gonna have a special meeting then. Hopefully we'll have representatives from the county and city and those who are experts on it locally. And so we'll talk about that with them. And our engineers will be here as well. And so those technical meetings are open. You can sit down, listen if you want, talk if you want, but it's all open. And then at 1 o'clock, we have a meeting on transportation. And so we'll be talking about traffic impacts and how to be multimodal and all those things. The next day on Saturday, we have a meeting at 9 a.m. focused on conservation and open space. And then we have another meeting at 1 about design and community character. Again, open to everyone. Design studio is going on in the background the whole time. It's open, everybody can hear. And my team will be within earshot of those meetings. So even if they're not in the meeting, they can hear what we're all saying. And so someone says, well, whatever you do, don't do this. You'll hear them erasing, or whatever. So it's very much real time. Then on Sunday, it's the open studio is going on. You can drop in. We don't have any meetings that day. That's really kind of our work day. And then on Monday, the 26th, we start moving into production mode where we're getting ready for the closing presentation, which is from 6 to 8 o'clock in the evening. And so at that presentation though, we will be presenting all of the work that we've done this week. You'll be shocked. You'll accuse us of having brought it with us. I promise. It happens every time. But with a team this big and as well-oiled of a machine as we are, and all know how to work together and really crank out the work and work late into the night, hopefully no all-nighters this time. But you will see a lot of stuff, so it'll be worth your while to come back. So hopefully you'll be in attendance then. So what we started doing so far is looking at the documents that you already have in place within the city and the county, looking at the zoning ordinances, looking at things like the vulnerability assessment, and then looking at our site surveys. There's a tree survey that's underway right now. You can see people out there on the site with machetes and stuff trying to get in there to survey all the trees, and there are a lot of trees. It's remarkable how many, when they send this information back, there's just dots everywhere. And so we started doing some site analysis. We started looking at the drainage patterns and where the wetlands are located and where the sort of main trees are located, and how it all ties in with the existing streets and neighborhoods. The site is so flat though, it's in some ways kind of disappointing because it doesn't give us all that much guidance. We like to let the land tell us what to do. And so we end up with some hydrology, obviously with wetlands, so that's good. And then the trees, that's good for them to start to indicate where we need to go and all that. So those are the kind of analysis we've been doing so far. And part of the land, 2 of the parcels are in the county and 1 is in the city of Fernandina Beach. And so we're trying to figure out what the process is. We've had a discussion with the city and the county to learn a little bit about what the process is for zoning, for annexation, for whatever the best strategy is that is the most beneficial for everyone. Right now, the parcels are zoned commercial. And so what we're trying to learn and understand better is, what does that mean? What can you do with commercial? What can't you do? And really understand how that fits in with what Bristol does as a development company. It's likely though that we will be asking for rezoning, right? And so now you say, well, why would we want you to rezone it? It's like, I don't know, what's in it for you, right? So we have to figure out is there a strategy? Is there a plan? Is there a concept? Assuming that the land isn't just bought for conservation purposes, which is always an option, we know. But I think, we've heard the city say that's not an option for the city to buy it, so it would be an individual at that point. So now we have to figure out what are the benefits of commercial from your perspective as a community over residential. Can you be more sensitive with commercial than you can be with residential, and all of those sort of things in between? I think at the end of the day, what would probably be the most interesting would be a mix of some of those things. From my perspective, just from a placemaking idea. So we'll be getting into that more and understanding more about those details moving forward. I'm sure you're all familiar with the site, but we like to look at it sort of regionally, zooming out a little bit and sort of, starting to see, we have obviously these major features here with the intercoastal and the sea there and the trail connecting the two, and airport is a big feature. The ball fields that are there, we learned are there, but they're not like for sure there forever. And so I think the airport can sell off that property and make a hangar, different aviation kind of uses can go there. But now it's currently ballpark, which is great. And so we're trying to think about what that means. Looking at the, Crane Island is here. We've been studying kind of how they've been trying to be sensitive with the land and do a good job from a stewardship perspective. And so that's instructive for us. Zooming in a little bit, these are the parcels that Charles was describing. So we have 8 acres here that's in the city. This is 11 acres or so that's in the county, and 25 acres that's in the county. Here is the senior housing project right here. Right now, this pond actually does drainage for this as well as the 8-acre site. So it was designed to accommodate that site as well. So that was interesting news to me. We have the roundabout here. So this is obviously kind of the main intersection. And then this is where you come down to the entrance to Crane Island and to the ballparks. And then we have the adjacent neighborhoods. So we have houses. So how many, show of hands, how many people are immediate neighbors? Great. You spend much time on the site? It's pretty awesome. It's when I went and took these pictures, I immediately my neck started burning and something bit me and I don't know what. It was like, yeah, it was like, get out of here, right? So it was nice, beautiful. What we learned was on the large parcel, the 25-acre site, apparently it historically had been a vegetable farm, and that when it stopped being a vegetable farm, they planted it with these pine trees, pond pines, I think they call them, that are not like the pines that everyone loves, but nonetheless, they're there and it makes it look very green. But we've been looking for kind of the beautiful hardwoods that are in there, and there are more than we thought. So that's what the initial reports are coming back. So I'm really excited about that. As I said, looking for traces on the land to guide us and direct us, and some of these great trees do so. The thing that's interesting to me, though, and as I've been learning about the coastal ecology and barrier islands and all of those things, and thinking about the sort of the overall value of different types of trees to the island, recognizing pines have sort of a limited value, and so I'm not sure why when they planted, I guess it's probably cheap and they put the pond pines out, they grew quickly. But be interesting as we're looking at doing things with the site. One of the things we've been kicking around is there a way to start to reforest it in its sort of more native canopy, right? And starting to undo some of that damage, I guess you'd say, but certainly wasn't the best thing for the land to be planted in that pine. So we're just, those are the kinds of things that are running through our head as we've been going through, and so we'll share some of that. Oh, here's Crane Island. If you haven't been past the gates, this is what it looks like in there. They've done a nice job. I mean, you see there's trees. The sidewalk was coming here and said, oh shoot, there's a tree. They went around the tree. So the sidewalk turned into a boardwalk, and then they kind of dealt with the stormwater in some sensitive ways here. They love this tree so much they decided to hug it with the roof. You can't see from the back, they actually notched out the roof there so the tree fit right in. Hopefully that tree will live and will stay there. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me better now? I bet. I'm terrible with the microphone. So we've also begun the listening process. So we've had the opportunity to sit down with a few representatives from the community, from different conservation groups and some of the neighborhood associations that nearby. And we've been taking notes. And so it was funny when I pulled up this list, this actually wasn't on the list, and I just added it a second ago. It says no development, if you can't read it back there. I thought, if we don't show that on there, then we're just gonna have no credibility at all. So we hear that, we get it loud and clear. Like, if all things considered, no development would be ideal from the community's perspective. I don't say everybody, but most people, right? I think we said the majority of the people. Then once we got past that, it says, well, we know that it is zoned. It's not zoned for conservation. It's not bought for conservation, all of that. So assuming it's going to be developed, then people said, reduce the impact. So incorporating low impact development strategies is critical. They said, no site is a blank site. So you can't just, start with a blank slate. You have to, I think what they meant was look at the land like we're doing, hear what it's telling you, look at the region and the context and all of that. We have to remember that this is a barrier island. It's not just coastal. It's has its own special environmental and ecological systems in place. It's interesting enough. I went to Auburn, and we did a study abroad program one semester, and our study abroad was on Dolphin Island. And so we studied coastal ecology of barrier islands, and we did a master plan for the whole island and a master plan for the sea lab there. But we took courses where we studied the ecology and the habitat and all that. I am not an expert in it. That was one semester a long time ago. But it just popped in my head. I was like, oh yeah, when this comment came out. So tree conservation is key, but also the understory is important. We've learned and we watched a great video that the Tree Conservancy group put out. And I'm talking all about the different aspects of the forest and how it's important. The prioritized resiliency and vulnerability studies. And so we've been looking at those, and strangely enough, when you look at it, I mean, all things considered, this is a pretty good site for development. If you had to have development on the island, it's kind of high and dry as you guys go. It's out of the major hazard areas. And so I was pleased to see that, we weren't having to come in and say, we know it's really dangerous for us to build here. Is it okay? So at least we're not there. Workforce housing is scarce. We've heard that, and we've heard it from a lot of people. Like, it's a real something that people are interested in and concerned. Okay, good. That was my same rain. Trying to figure out how to accomplish that is what's the key. We actually did the comprehensive plan for Snowmass, Colorado, and in Snowmass, workforce housing was one of the most critical topics that they cared about, because all the people that they needed to maintain their life in Snowmass had to live down valley 45 minutes or whatever, and it just, at some point, it's not worth it for them. And if they didn't show up for work, then Snowmass ceased to exist, right? So it was really important for them as well. And so we've had to look into it from that perspective in an affluent community where it's more of the service workers, and then also working around the country in cities where it's not affluent, and it's just an overall consideration and concern for the community. So we also heard be honest. So I have to tell you, because I go to such great lengths to be transparent, to tell you exactly what's going on, to conduct this whole process earnestly, that when people say like, oh, I don't believe you, whatever, I take it personally. I probably won't yell or freak out, but I will just ask that until we prove ourselves untrustworthy to you, that you at least give us the benefit of the doubt for a little while, at least for the first 2 days. So the destinations along the New River to Sea Trail and meaningful integration is needed. And so we see that as a real amenity and a real opportunity as well. That, this site being right there next to the trail, the trail comes through now, but wouldn't it be cool if there was a place to stop and to experience something, or you want like a trailhead, like if you start there or whatever. So we're looking at what that looks like, what that could mean, and looking at examples. We'll see over and over. We're always looking for examples. We'll say, oh, we should do, and I'll say, oh, well, have you seen something like this that you thought was really cool. And so we'll always look for a precedent. And so we're doing that. A greater variety of uses within walkable environment is needed. And I thought that was interesting. I think a lot of times when we are, looking at conservation and sustainability as being fundamental and crucial, a lot of times, people start to think of it in a different way where it's devoid of the placemaking side of things. It's it's like you think about some of the places you love the most around the world or around the country, and they've been built within the landscape, but in some areas they've been more impactful as far as what they've done to the land. In other areas have been more sensitive. And so not having a one size fits all, like we hear all the time, like, oh yeah, we need to have a buffer of X feet around this. I say, well, some places, can we have it bigger than that? Right? Does it always have to only be 25 feet? And so one size fits all when you're dealing with something as varied and diverse as nature and ecology, like how do we think about those things? And so the idea of a greater variety of uses within a walkable place, it's wonderful because you start to think about why and what are the most vibrant and successful ecosystems. It's those that have a lot of biodiversity in them, right? And so we actually translate that as well into the human habitat. You'll see in a second. Great traditions and community events are around here. And so how do you build on those or be part of those? And then new development that people have been seeing is not in keeping with the character of the community. For instance, we heard that this development was not everyone's favorite. Right? And we said, hey, we're doing our charrette at this site. Oh, okay. And we wanted to show you how, you can learn from things that could have been done differently in the past, right? It's great, by the way. We're staying here, lovely rooms, all of that. I think probably your concern was more overall the scale and the character and how it fit in with the surroundings. So I understand what you're saying. And so it will be really an ironic and wonderful place for us to dream big together. Right? So for those who don't know, this is what's called a transect. And this is the way that those in the environmental sciences divide the habitat into a series of different parts and pieces so you can understand it. Because there's so much going on that if you don't start to break it up, you can't understand it. It's just too much. And so normally, when a transect is created, it stops about right here, and it stops about where people begin. And so we actually extend this concept of the transect into the human habitat as well, because we are here, even though we are having our impacts, and we may wish that we weren't here, but we are. And so here we're picking up with nature, and then typically you move into a rural area, rural zone, and then you start to get a little bit more settlement happening with some larger houses set on larger lots set back from the street. Moving in, you tend to get a little bit more urbane, houses closer together. You start having some mix of uses, and then you get into a center area. And so the same thing in the natural habitat progresses for the human habitat. Now, this is the problem, from my perspective at least, and you may agree. This is what we get in most places around the country, right? And so there's this whole concept of suburban sprawl, and this is called this Anywhere USA. And if it weren't for the palm trees, you couldn't even tell what part of the country this was in, right? Which is pretty sad state of affairs, and that's what highways look like in most places. You guys have done a nice job of protecting yourselves against this kind of stuff for the most part. There are a few oopsies around, but nonetheless. This is the funniest picture to me. You probably can't see, but right here, it's a Beautification Award. So Burger King totally kicked McDonald's butt, and we've got the flowers here. They've got some pansies and some boxwoods, and it's way better than Hardee's and McDonald's or Express Oil Change. So they got an award. I'm thinking if you're giving awards out for places that look like this, you've probably set your bar way too low, right? And so we need to reconsider that. So we call that beauty in the eye of the beholder. Open space, this is one of the things that you all are quite familiar with asking for. And everywhere we work around the country, we hear people say, we want more open space, more open space. And cities, we write zoning ordinances and they fight hard, 50% open space, 60%, the more the better. But they just ask for open space. And open space has different values, right, over the types of open space. So this is open space. If you can see in the back, I think they may have spray painted it green, but it's the leftover stuff behind some townhouses that they couldn't figure out what to do with. And so they met their open space requirement with this greenery. And you don't know whether or not you can throw a Frisbee back here. Are you going to get arrested because people think you're looking in your windows? Is this public? Is it private? We don't know. This is what open space used to be, right? It's probably about the same amount if you add it all up. This is the heart of the community, right? This is the main central park of this town. Buildings based onto it. You have mixed uses around it and all of those things. There's a neighborhood scale, so the neighborhood would have their own little park in the neighborhood. And we've gotten away from that so much. And most of the time when cities are asking for open space, they'll get a park and it'll be sort of over there. And like, why is that park there? Well, the city owned that land, so it was cheap, so we put a park there. And like, well, is that the best place for the park? Is that what you needed to make your quality of life better? And so one of the things we're looking at is, what are the open space needs in this area? Do we have needs for more parks? And there seems to be a lot of people living around here. Are there plenty of parks? Maybe there are, maybe we won't need it. But streets, this is another thing. Most of the cities we work in, streets are designed for cars. First and foremost for cars. And maybe even for, more importantly, for fire trucks or garbage trucks or the widest vehicle you could possibly imagine going through there. And this is what they look like. And so this little Corolla or whatever this is, you could get probably 10 across there. I think I measured it one time. I don't know what that road, this was like a road to an apartment complex. And I don't know what they thought was going to happen on that road, but it probably met all the standards in the city and the developer didn't want to do it, but they had to. This is how streets used to be designed, and they were designed for people and for horses and for cars and for whatever the case was. But there was not a prioritization of one over the other. And this is actually a new street that was designed in the 80s in a new walkable neighborhood. But it's funny because you see right here, here's the sidewalk. No respectable kid in the right mind would be caught on the sidewalk. They want to be in the street, right? So the street needs to be safe and all that. And so designing it to meet some engineering standard that is not ideal. And taking it to the next level, even like the turning radius, you can see here, what is this, a gremlin? So it's coming around the corner and the turning radius here is so wide, he didn't even have to hit his brakes. And so you see he's like leaning with centrifugal force into the turn. And you can imagine if this guy was standing right here, it would be a pretty uncomfortable situation to be in. Whereas in a beautiful, walkable, historic neighborhood, the radius is nearly like a 90-degree turn. So you have to nearly come to a stop. Natural traffic calming without all the humps and bumps and all of those things that people sort of band-aids they put on roads that are poorly designed now. So streets for people versus streets for cars. So the other thing that you see typically in the country is this idea of separating all the uses one from the next into these different pods. So you have the commercial pod here. You've got, hopefully that's not what your commercial allows, by the way, but you've got a office pod, and then you've got the residential single family pod. Then there's also the multifamily pods, so they would separate those. And then a school pod even, this is not a factory, this is a school. And so they're all separated one from the next. And so what you see is we've lost kind of how we used to make great places historically. The places that you all love, the places that you have great examples of here in your historic areas. But the newer neighborhoods don't resemble those neighborhoods at all, strangely, even though they're some of the most beloved parts of the island. And so here's kind of the cartoon that describes it. There's the pods on the bottom here. And the thing that's a bummer about these pods, besides just the overall lack of character of them, is that every pod, for every use, you have to go get on the collector road. And so you go to work, you get on the collector road, you go home, you go to the shop, you go to the collector road, and every time you're doing, you're clogging up, causing traffic that we all hate. The thing that's so funny is you say, the traffic is the worst here. The thing that's interesting is you are your neighbor's traffic, right? People don't think of it that way, right? But you are the person in the car next to somebody else. And so what used to happen was all the streets were connected and all the different uses were intermingled and you could go do everything you needed to do. without getting on the collector road. And you only had to get on the collector road if you're going to the next town over, right? And so we've forgotten the wisdom of ages. This actually works really well also for emergency services. So you don't have to worry about there being a wreck and the cul-de-sac, now they're stuck and they can't get to somebody. They can go a multitude of ways, just like you can when you're getting around. There are some design principles that are enduring from these places. So they tend to be walkable, the most loved places around the world and around the country. We know the average American is willing to walk about 5 minutes, which happens to be about a quarter of a mile, 1,320 feet. 6 minutes, forget it. I'm getting in my car, I'm gonna drive. Somehow 5 minutes is, people feel okay about it. They tend to be mixed use. Not mixed use maybe on a grand scale, but so you can get some of your daily needs met. You're maybe not doing your weekly grocery shopping there, but mixed use, like retail, corner store, or something like that, they tend to be compact. So they would develop more densely so they could conserve elsewhere. And so we've gotten in the cycle of actually a lot of places we work, they're promoting larger lots as a conservation strategy. But as you drive through all the neighborhoods, we all know that lawn is not conservation, right? And so thinking about, how do we do that? And so looking at being a little bit more compact and then diverse, like I said before, that biodiversity translates into housing diversity, translates into solving some of your affordability issues, your workforce housing, translates into having people of different ages and incomes and all of that within the same community. So you can get to know. I hear all the time people say, you know what, like I'm getting to the point where I'm ready to downsize, but I don't want to go to one of these senior living places or whatever and be around a bunch of people who are my same age. I want to be around people who are younger than me and people who are, different and all of this. And so my life will be more interesting. And so that's how diversity plays in for your housing. So here's some of the things we're thinking about. Obviously, first and foremost, tree preservation. Now, these look a little bit tight to me, a little bit puny. So we're going to make sure we're working with best practices. That's why we've been looking around here around the island and nationally, like literally Googling, like what are the communities that are doing the best job in preserving trees on the site. So that's going to be important. Thinking about wildlife friendly design, people said it's not just the trees, also the wildlife when you're going into disturbance. So I was like, oh, that's great, good point. So I was looking around and this is actually really cool. It's probably hard to see back there. This is a salamander crossing. I think they had a particular salamander in this site that was really endangered or whatever. And it's this narrow little thing. This is probably more typical, turtles and small mammals can run through there. And then also the certified backyard habitats and getting, Audubon and various groups like that to start to do these things, because here's the bottom line is from the developer's perspective, what I want to do is start with the stuff that we can do easily. It doesn't really cost a bunch of money, right? We say like, here are all these things that most developers just don't bother with. They don't take the time, they don't care to do. So let's start with that stuff and work our way up from there. And at the end of the day, the project's going to be better for all animals as well, but also better for the people who live there or better for the neighbors who are concerned about these things. So understanding and incorporating these concepts is important. Also working with the land, design with nature. If you're familiar with this concept, this Ian McCard developed this concept, design with nature years ago, and sort of overlay all the environmental features of the site, and it begins to show you where are the best parts and pieces of the site to develop. We're looking at some of these amazing examples. This is a project, this is new development outside of Birmingham called Mount Laurel. And on this site, they limited site clearance to chainsaws and bobcats. So if you're going to clear a home site, you clear it with a chainsaw. If you're going to grade a road, you're going to do it with a bobcat. So very small. And all of the stone that you see here came off the site. So they had these wonderful rocks around. So they brought in this crew. They just hired us, like, you guys are just working for us, making these little walls, and now they're incorporated. And it is one of the, you wouldn't believe that it's a new development. It's incredible. We heard there's a need for a dog park. And so I said, well, that sounds great, but dog parks, like a lot of dog parks I see are like a park and they've just cleared it, right? And so I'm like, wow, is there a woodland version of that? Like, how do you do a dog park in the forest, And so I started looking there. I think you may have a dog park, but it's away, right, from the site. So maybe you have one near, I don't know. But so See, this is what we do. We test out. We hear things and we say, here's what we heard. And you said, no, that's not true. So note that. Also looking at trails and parks. So how do you incorporate? So it's great that, you know, we have the big trail that runs adjacent to us, but it got to connect to it, right? And then also too, as I said, from y'all's perspective, like what's in it for us? We're here to participate in this process. You know, we don't want development anyway. So some of the things that I like to try to think about are so community benefit, like what can we do as part of this development that if we're going to have development, it can work for you. You can be excited about it. So trying to figure out ways to do trails and parks and make land that we could develop or we don't want to develop or whatever accessible, right? And a feature. So not just for the residents, but for the whole community at large can come in. By the way, not Gates, but this is not one of those places, right? Sustainable stormwater. Obviously, stormwater is something that has to be dealt with. From our perspective, it can be incredible. It can be beautiful. It can be art. It can be an amazing case study. I want people to come here at the end of the day and see, like, how do you do stormwater right? And so here we're just pulling in some examples of cool stuff that people have done. This is a great little, there's little cottages on both sides here. They have a wetlands, a little boardwalks that go across, and some benches. And, you know, this is a green alley with this grass creek where the grass grows up between it. You know, here doing bioswales on the streets, rain barrels on the buildings, all kind. You know, you can do amazing things. You just have to take the time and care enough to do it. So, dark skies. Hopefully that wasn't Charles just running out of the room. Like I said, he hasn't seen this presentation. So, so dark skies is something that again is easy to do, right? If you just think about it. So keeping the light pollution down, having light fixtures that don't just blast it up. So this could be a stargazing community, except for all the trees we're going to save. Probably won't be able to see too many stars, but nonetheless. And then I mentioned too a mix of housing typologies. Now, if you've gone to their website, Bristol has lots of apartment projects that they worked on over the years. One of the things that we're exploring in this project is the idea of still having buildings that are for rent, but having a full array of building typologies. So detached single family houses, duplexes, cottage courts, so some little bungalows along them, maybe some row houses even. Some apartment houses, so you know, small scale. So I think this building has like 8 units, 10 units in it maybe, and maybe some mid-scale. They've done a horrible job here of preserving trees, by the way. I know. I don't think they're actually working on the site. It was a field beforehand, but I didn't want to show that picture. But I thought the scale of the building was nice, so I ran the risk. But then also, as I mentioned, the idea of a mix of uses. We're already currently zoned for commercial. And so rather than just saying, well, we don't want any commercial, like what if we made something that was really neat and like a neighborhood center, neighborhood serving commercial? We started looking at some inspiration. This is just up the road from us in Franklin. This is a little hamlet called Leaper's Fork. It's a beautiful example of how to do sort of rural village-esque development. This is in that Mount Laurel I mentioned in Birmingham, the tree preservation at Great Town Center. As well, there's a project called Serenby. If you haven't seen Serenby, it's also incredible. They've done just the work with the landscape. This is over in Habersham in Beaufort, South Carolina. Neighborhood center here, a little pizza restaurant. People live above some shops and small scale. There's a handful of buildings around that make that center. And then one things I got people to say they liked was Palmetto Walk. Right? Is that Palmetto? So tell me the one development you like. Oh, you know, I kind of like about Palmetto Walk. So we went and checked it out. And I can see, you know, it's like charming, it's intimate, it's small scale. It's, you know, it kind of feels like a little village center, even though it's kind of on the highway here, you know. And they've done a nice job vegetating it. So looking for inspiration, some of these places. So those are some of the big ideas that we've been thinking about just from the few things that we've heard from you so far. So that's as far as we've gotten, and most of those have come up in the past week or past day as I was working on the presentation. So I didn't. So we're going to transition to the workshop, but I'm going to pause. We're going to set a timer for 10 minutes. We're going to take a few initial questions, and when the 10-minute timer goes off, I'm going to turn the microphone off. because I know you'll probably have more than 10 minutes of questions. We'll do the workshop and then we'll come back and talk some more. But it really is important for us for you guys to do this. So thank you for indulging me and listening so far. And who's first? Okay. Yes.
Who owns these properties now?
Who owns the properties now, Charles?
It's a trust that has owned the property for about 40 years.
A trust that has owned the property for about 40 years. I was certain everyone's hand was going to pop up. This is amazing. Yes, there we go.
You had mentioned about drainage, you know, the senior living, there's a big pond there. Do you foresee through the development of 28 more as well? You see more ponds being built?
Yeah, so what I always say on any project we're working on is, I don't want to have a pond unless we have to have a pond. Right? No, I got it wrong. I don't want to have a pond unless we want to have a pond. That's what I meant to say. Like as a feature, as a something we want, right? There's so many different things that we can do to accomplish the goals that the ponds are seeking to accomplish without cutting down all the trees. And that's my big problem in a place like this with the ponds. We were working somewhere in outside of St. Louis, and it was a cornfield, and they thought it was in the floodplain for years. They resurveyed it. Magically, it wasn't. But we had to deal with like 75 acres of water on the site. Well, it didn't matter. It was ponds because there were no trees. We didn't have to cut anything down. It's just corn. And so even in that case, we made this amazing system of lakes and canals and buildings based onto them. And so if we have to have some, so be it. But I'd like to use some of these other techniques, these low impact development techniques. And if we want a pond somewhere, then let's make a pond. But let's not get forced to have a pond because we weren't being thoughtful about the environmental regulations or stormwater regulations.
I guess quite a question.
Yeah.
Height restrictions on any buildings in this area?
Yes, I think the zoning right now lets us go up 40 feet,
45
45 feet.
in the city. City attorney.
Yeah, but the count,
Right, that's right. Some of it's county.
some of this is on count.
It is. Ryan mentioned this, we were asked before too. Process we would go through, we believe, is that we would annex the annex to the city first, then go through land use changes, zoning in the city. That appears to be what the county and planning, county and the city planning staffs have agreed on. Absolutely finalize that. I know that these things here. So I'm not presuming that that's the route we go, but that's what we understand so far. So when I said that 45 feet, referring to the city.
Yeah. But remember, it's going commercial today. So today you follow a commercial. If you change the zoning, then our height may change along with it.
Right. Yeah, as I said, we're so early on in the process of, I hope I don't seem like I'm unprepared. But again, like what I want to do is come in and say like, okay, well, yeah, there are zoning regulations and all of that kind of stuff, but what makes the most sense? And, I may walk in here and I knew what had happened, but I may walk in here and you all go like, oh yeah, you know what? We really think you should go high on the site, and, zoning right now will let you go this high. I know that's not the case, but so, yes.
How many, I don't know,
I have no idea. It's literally there.
how
How many units? How many rental units?
Yes, I mean, but there's, you've got to have an idea.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about hundreds or ROI, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be an ROI.
I piggyback on that. You said you came in without any preconceived ideas what this will look like aesthetically.
Yeah.
Well, your presentation was very well thought out. I love the pictures and ideas of the big buffers and all that. It was very good, but there's a financial consideration behind this, and this is why we come. I don't want to say we don't trust you personally, but we have to be sober about this financially and know, well, when we design it so beautifully with so many buffers, we can't get density in and make an ROI. So,
Right.
we're going to be looking at that.
Well, and one of the people that we have here this week, which is unusual. Actually, maybe the first time that we've had this particular expertise at Charrette this early on is somebody who's going to be working on the construction side. And so we can actually sit here and talk about it. We can look at it and understand what are the cost implications. Because I asked, I said, hey, I asked the question to Charles. I said, hey, Charles, how many units do you need? He said, it's flexible. He said, literally. I said, well, yeah, but I mean, in most apartment deals, you gotta typically have 250, 300 units, whatever, on and on. But, this site, this place, this market is different than a lot of other places. And so it'll probably can allow for you to not be as aggressive as you might otherwise be. So I don't know, honestly. We'll probably look at some ideas that are more dense and that are less dense and figure out what makes the most sense. But there are limiting factors, right? So height will be one, preservation, conservation, community character, all of those kind of things are, I know for you all, just like brass tacks, get to the numbers, right? It's hard for me to say to you, just wait and see, right? But I can tell you right now, I have no idea. I haven't been given a direction. I haven't been given guidance as to how many units I have to get. So we're going to start drawing, we're going to start planning and figuring out stuff together, and we're going to back into it and see how many units it yields. And then we can say, you guys go, oh my God, I can't believe it's that few, or oh my God, that's terrible, that's so many. So,
Will you be able to do that by Monday night?
yeah. Yeah.
So then let's just ostensibly fewer units means we lose our affordable housing or something, right? There's trade-offs, right?
It's hard. That is the tricky thing, the affordable housing and workforce housing. Like, and you don't want to go like, oh, well, if you let's do more, you won't get any of that. Like, you don't say that. But to your point, it is a numbers game somewhat. But I think there are opportunities. We're looking at things like, are there, programs that you can, that help the developer provide those things without having to go up high and all that stuff. So
that was the question. So could you help the audience understand, including myself, how this works? So Bristol's a developer, and then don't they sell this once they're done developing?
sometimes
How
they.
does that work? Is that decided?
Yeah, no, the answer is, and I asked that, somebody asked it at one of our last meetings. The question is, do they sell it off after they're done? I think, Charles, correct me if I'm wrong, the answer was sometimes yes, sometimes no, but you have to design it, plan it, and build it as if you're gonna keep it, which means it has to be to the highest quality regardless. Is that?
Yes, I mean, if you go on our website, you'll see there's a little button you click to say invest. If you want to, we'd be happy to help you, but it explains there, what we do. When we raise money for a development, we usually get about 60 or 65% of the funds from commercial bank and construction money. The rest of that money we raise from investors, which could be, we use insurance companies, pension funds, high net worth high net worth individuals, family offices, and who we get the money from dictates what we do at the end. We like to keep the project as long as we can, because that's better for us. Sometimes our investors want them sold quickly. But in the apartment industry, the shopping center industry, the office industry, the industrial industry, those have now become largely ruled by institutional investors. Big time people who professionally manage their properties. So if we want to sell something, those groups will send a team of engineers and consultants in to go through everything we've done for the fine tooth comb. And so you really have to build something like you're going to keep it, because if you don't, then when it does come time to sell it, you're going to pay other people. So I think that's the way we look at it when we're developing something.
I don't know how many meetings like this you guys have come to, but even I've been to a gazillion, working for the client. And I don't know if I've ever heard a developer be that forthcoming with their business model and all of that stuff. So I hope that's not lost on you guys, that's most of it. We normally use some vague answer and try to give you. So hold on. You had your hand up for a while on the light blue there, I think? Yes, you. And then we'll go to you.
Tell us about your experience in doing development work in Florida.
Is it different than Tennessee and St. Louis and all these other places that you've been to?
Yes,
And because we have lots of rules, St. John's Water River Management District, who tells you where to put your drop bombs and things like that. So I'm interested in your experience in working in this state.
yes, great question. So part of the reason why we have a big team is that some of us are national and some of us are local. So our engineer, Peter, is here. You're based in Jacksonville, I think, and works all over. He is involved in projects on the island, so he knows all those regulations very well. We actually are working on a big project in Jacksonville right now called Seven Pines for the Skinner family. It's an 1,100 acre mixed use project. And then Charles in Bristol has done a lot of development around the region. The architects have worked here as well. So we have some experience here, some more so than others. I would say that Peter is an expert and I'm an intermediate level. So,
Thank you.
yes, with the floor, and then back to you. Sure. But yes, yes.
You mentioned the 8 acres that the drainage is tied to the detention pond that serves Lakewood. Did I get that right?
That's right.
I mean, excuse me. So does that mean there's constraints in how you would use or develop that 8 acre parcel because I guess that's already been permitted for drainage?
That's a great point. It must be, because there are calculations done in order to figure it out. So, Peter, do you have a more, we can talk about that more maybe during the utility meeting or technical, but if you want to give a short answer.
Yes, so 8 acres is the master plan village.
So there had to be some anticipated development on that parcel that would be used for those calculations. So we'll look more into that, understand what it means. And that could be a limiting factor for that site. So that's a good point. Thank you. So with the black shirt and then very back.
So tying into the drainage question, is that a detention pond or a retention pond?
Yeah.
Where's the ultimate outfall in the river?
It goes up to the roadside bridge, Parkway, and then it goes, the water goes up to the mountain.
Doesn't empty.
Doesn't empty.
It's damming the whole time. And it's a swamp, but it's a wet sort of swamp.
It's a wet.
Yeah, there's some wetlands over there for sure. We know, so we're looking into that.
But my real question, I wanted to go back to the zoning, the anticipated zoning. I mean, right now, the future zoning is commercial, but it sounds like you guys are moving more towards a mixed use residential commercial. And is there a specified percentage of green space or conservation space within that zoning?
Yeah, so the way that you would accomplish it is, I think the best strategy to give the most flexibility, make the most interesting project would be using a PUD. Now, the thing about a PUD is you are essentially writing your own rules and regulations. It can be used for good or it can be used for evil, right? And so you never know what's going to come out the other end, which is the reason I don't like PUDs. But I think that's the mechanism that we would use. And so we would set what those requirements are, but there would be typically in the county or city regs, sometimes there are limits within a PUD. It's not a free for all. You still have some things you have to follow. So in the very back, I saw your hand up.
I just wanted to say, as a city resident, what I'm concerned about is the increase of population, whether it's a tourist population coming to a hotel, or whether it's new residents, because our infrastructure on this island is very limited. Infrastructure then opens roads, it means school, it means fire, it means city facilities, it means hurricane evacuation, it means city restaurants trying to get into places that we frequent. And I think that it's a huge concern that we're not paying attention to. We all care about the natural environment, but we're getting crowded about this island. I don't know how that works into what this can be, but population is.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. Yes, sir.
question, directed to the gentleman, Bristol. You're saying very simply, you have no plan, no idea what you're going to do. And, as much as I want to believe that, I can't. You're a multi-family developer, you're a planner. You didn't come down to Franklin, Tennessee, to know how this business.
No, we came out to draw a plan.
But you had to run some performance, you had to run some numbers, look at your ROI, come back on the investment. I've done this business before, I kind of know that you just don't do it for nothing.
What normally happens, here's the only difference, right? As Charles described at the beginning, normally the developer and their planner and their engineers show up at the planning commission hearing. And they've done all of this stuff, right? And they did it before they went to the planning commission. The only difference is we've just invited you to participate. And so,
Excuse me, but you just mentioned, you're talking with the planning group about the details of height limitation and so forth. Surely he has something in his mind of what he wants to develop. I mean, I can't imagine when you come here and develop, a hospital or a mortuary or
right, I think it falls within the range of what was in the presentation. Yes, Charles, go ahead.
You're absolutely right. We have done our homework. We think we know what the market opportunities are here for development. And I think there's room for somewhere between a small to a large commercial component. I don't know whether the community would support either of those, but I think the market opportunity is here to support that. And we think that there is a market opportunity for multifamily housing. Ryan showed pictures of apartment type buildings. That is one of the things we do. We also do some retail development. We've also done single family housing. I think there is a market opportunity for single family housing. That could be any of the varieties that Ryan put on the screen here. I have thoughts about which of those might be the most viable, but I think any of them could be viable. Well, here's what I don't think it will be. It won't be a hotel. It won't be an industrial park. It won't be all commercial. It won't be a school or anything else. So we have done our homework. But what we try to do is not say, okay, here's what it will be, but to provide these kind of a framework within which we'll then see community input to come up with.
Yeah, sorry, I guess I was assuming within the parameters of the things that I presented, the different types, buildings, mixed use, et cetera, that was clear. So yeah, so the idea of thinking what the market it could bear here is interested in has certainly been thought of. It's not just like, hey, let's go. And you guys could have said, we need a Ferris wheel or something. And Charles was like, okay, sounds good, let's do it. So that's yes.
I have a question. Now, what if we work out something really beautiful, very acceptable to all parties, and then the investors are presented with whatever we think is going to be a really excellent idea, and we say, oh, no, we need a lot more units. Oh, no, that's it.
Whatever we have at the end of the day, it's got to be economically viable. And I think we get a business long enough to know whether it is or it isn't. If it's not economically viable, then we're not going to do it. So we know the investment community will
But what we don't want to do is like draw something that you all get excited about and then show up at planning commission with something else. Old bait and switch, like that's not okay. So obviously.
It might help if you were to put this drawing back up and give us some of the creative theories that you all have discussed amongst yourselves and with the other commissions to give us an idea of where to start. Because you've got an 8-acre tract with roads and wet areas and infrastructure space. There's not a lot of developmental space on some of these tracts. So where are we to begin in trying to give input or plan?
I mean, honestly, I think the extent of thinking is like, I saw there's an airport there. I was like, oh, it'd be kind of cool if people are aviation enthusiasts to watch the planes land and all that, but then we realized there's this buffer you have to have between the airport and any development that goes there, so that kind of went out the window. We're thinking, there's single family detached houses all around the edges, so maybe it made sense to transition nicely from single family detached to single family detached. That's literally the extent of it. So when you go through
So
the
you're
workshop,
going to make us the experts in planning the project.
No. Well, you'll have your limits. Some of you will be like, oh yeah, I love this. This is what I do for fun on the weekends. And I'm like, they're gonna draw all over it. Some of you will be like, yeah, well, the best I've got is I like to see this, that, or that, something here or there or whatever. And so when we go through the workshop, it's like you'll have some guidance. There'll be some, to help you along, so you're not just staring at each other. Yes, sir.
I'm just a little bit puzzled. We're talking about this as like one big project development, but the way I look at it, these are three totally different tracks. They're separated by the Parkway, they're not even accessible to one another. To get from one to the other would be a major operation. To pull into the Parkway and then get across the Parkway or whatever. They're not. They're totally, to me, they're three separate tracks, and we're talking about them like we're developing a community, but they're all totally separate.
Yeah, so that's a good point. And that is the way that development has occurred since, I don't know, after World War II, kind of when we stopped making the most beloved towns and cities, right? But if you think about the places that you love the most, they have like Main Street in a lot of towns is a state highway. You've got, different things that separate, or are they connectors between them, right? Right now, like I don't want to just make a way for, turtles and salamanders to get from one side to the next. Like people could also get from one side to the next. Right now, the road is designed for cars, right? And so the current reality, what you're saying is correct, right? But I think there's plenty of models and ways we can think about it from a more holistic perspective so that you can get the most benefit from it. So for instance, from a conservation perspective, you could develop some areas more densely and other areas not densely, right? Because we're thinking of it together. And now it's like, oh, there's development that has park around it or whatever. So some of those kind of things. So just like stretch your mind and don't think about those like, yeah, there's the yellow line around each of them. I know what you mean, but just think of it as a whole, because we know how to make intersections that people can cross if they wanted to. It's just, we do it every day. Yeah. Oh, so they're all telling me our 10-minute timer silently went off apparently. So when I said put it